conservative or a Republican? What would you consider yourself more?
American. I mean, I'm conservative socially and fiscally, but I put my country and my state ahead of anything else because I think people just want people who understand the difference between right and wrong. On the issues, you know, if you had to pick in terms of social and fiscal policy, I'm a conservative. There's no doubt about it. And I think the party, the principles of the Republican Party are that as well. I think the problem has been a lot of people in Washington, even more so than Madison, had drifted away from that. And I think, again, that's one of those things that gives me an edge. Someone asked me recently at one of the Tea Party functions how I was going to appeal to Tea Party voters. And I said, I'm not going to do anything different than what I do. I think people who go to Tea Party events aren't necessarily Republican, although probably many are. They're people who've just had it, become very cynical with the government, and want more than just hollow promises. They want people who can deliver. Again, another difference. Mark and I think ideologically are very parallel, very similar beliefs. The difference is he's voted for it in Congress. I've actually done it as a chief executive officer. It doesn't, you know, it's two different approaches. Doesn't mean necessarily better. It's just he hasn't had that experience of actually having to do it in the arena of a government. You know, it's, you run a small business, I don't know what the size is, the home building, 25, 30 people. That's great. I want more small business. But that's not the same as the pressures that you get being in a position like mine, certainly not like that being a governor. And again, not just that I've done it, but I'm tested. You know, I often say if I can take on the political machine in Milwaukee, of all places, and still keep my principles intact and do what I said I was going to do, there's no doubt we can do it in Madison. And that's where the people at the Tea Party, you know, people say, I want proof. I want to know you can actually, you can do it. I want credibility.
What are people asking you about the most? And I guess as part of that, I think just from a sense that we get, and certainly what Mr. Newman said, it seems to be really ramped up right now as far as interest in politics and
yeah.
the governor's race, especially because obviously there's going to be a new governor. So it seems like it's especially. He even said he felt like it felt like the last month of the campaign almost. That's how much energy there is in people's interest in them. And so tell me a little bit about what people are asking you about and just seeing kind of how you sense the level of interest.
Well, I think what I hear the most, and I don't just, I was saying earlier, I like to, not at Krista's Kitchen, but I like to go to places like that, be it a coffee shop, a diner, a supper club. Even if I'm coming into a town for a speech, I was in Rhinelander the other day, I had a speech at one. When I went to 3 or 4 diners downtown before church for breakfast to just talk to people. And the biggest thing I hear is people are just scared. They're scared about the economy. Whether it's their own job, their spouse's job, a lot of times their kid's job, if they're a small business owner or an owner of a business, their employee's job, they're just plain scared. And even if their job is okay, if you pick a little bit at their comments, I find a lot of people who are in secure jobs, they're just so afraid of the economy, and a lot of times they'll tell me they're afraid of what the government's doing. More often than not, even more so than the state, they point to the federal government. I think the whole healthcare debate, not just in the product, but the process, has them afraid of what more is going to happen from the government. And so people are very uncertain about that. In terms of the impact on the governor's race, yeah, I don't know that it's just because it's an open seat or that. I think just people in general are pumped up in much the same way I saw people in my community pumped up 8 years ago when there was a recall. The pension for us back then was kind of the last straw. It was the thing that blew the top of the kettle pot off. But it was years of unaccountable government, high taxes, cronyism, all these things that people kind of simmered about but never had enough to blow the top off. Nationally, I think the healthcare debate kind of personifies that, but it wasn't just healthcare. It's all these other things, taxes out of control, and trading votes for things. And so I think a lot of the people I hear from, there's no doubt about it, people are more engaged than ever before. A lot of times I come to places and crowds are 2-3 times the size I've ever seen before at events like that. And I'd say anywhere from a third to half the people are people who said, never been involved before, never been engaged, or if they have been, it's been years, but they just feel too much is at stake.
So what specifically are you going to do as governor to right that ship, get us back into some semblance of a balanced budget, and get people back to work.
Yeah. Well, a couple of different elements to that. Just on the budget part, I think there's two different strategies that are parallel. One is there's no doubt you got to control spending. And that means things as simple as individual programs we've got to go after. You look at Wisconsin Shares, the child care program. That originally in the 90s when Tommy was here and I was in the legislature, we voted for W-2. That was part of W-2 to be a temporary safety net as people went from welfare into the workforce. You gave them help with child care short term, and you gave them help with health care. The problem is under Doyle, those time limits have been taken away. And so what was supposed to be a temporary step up into full employment and not dependency on the government has become a permanent entitlement. And so we see the stories, a lot of them have in Milwaukee, but they're everywhere. They were seen Madison, Green Bay, there's just more people in the Milwaukee area, so there's more stories there. But they're all over the place, where the permanent entitlement has led to massive fraud. Legislative Audit Bureau showed anywhere from 10 to 25% when they did an audit, fraud in a several $100 million program. You got to go after programs like that. You got to go after wage and benefit reform. You got to do other things that not only solve this year's or this coming biennial budget challenge, but future years. Because we're not any better off than we were 2 years ago. In fact, I met with Bob Lang, the head of the fiscal bureau, and we're at $2.4 billion before any agency request. That's a deficit that's $800 million worse than it was 2 years ago. So you got to control spending. But the other parallel part is I believe you can't cut your way to prosperity. You also have to grow, but not the size of the government, grow the economy. And it's where I go through these principles, and you heard me say this before, we call it our brown bag, but I believe you don't spend more money than you have, which is clearly the spending side. Smaller government is better government, which is what we'll be doing there. But then the third part, excuse my allergy, third part is, I say people create jobs, not the government, but that's really true. The best way to get the economy going, you mentioned WMC at Business Day 2 months ago in front of WMC. I laid out 6 specific points. We put all the details on our website. We've got a special one just for that called 250,000jobs.org. We laid out 6 points about cutting the tax burden on employers, on individuals, helping cap off property taxes, even things like phasing out the state tax and retirement income. Secondly, cutting through the red tape, eating through regulatory burdens. You not only heard it with the guys at the factory, but frankly, Krista's Kitchen, she told me, with 13 employees, that's one of her biggest hassles. A lot of small businesses say, I just want to do what I got in the business for, but yet I got mountains of red tape to eat through. Help reduce the lawsuit burden. I think there's too many frivolous and out of control nuisance lawsuits in this state. Those first 3 in particular, you look at other states, Texas, Tennessee, others that have done that, reduce their tax burden, cut through the red tape, done true tort reform. Those are states that have seen job growth even under times like we're in. In fact, Texas a year ago had more jobs in one state than all 49 states combined. So I believe you do it boldly and aggressively, not just don't raise taxes, but actually cut them. Those things will do enough to help truly stimulate the economy that you'll actually see more revenue, and other states that have done this have seen this. More revenue will come in, even though you're at lower tax rates, because more people will take that money as employers and put it back into creating jobs. More individuals will use that in the purchasing power. We've seen trends like that all across the country. The other 3 things are holding our education system accountable and making improvements there, K through 12, as well as our university system. Tackling healthcare, but not so much when it comes to access and quality, because we already rank at or near the top in both of those, but helping drive down cost for small businesses and family farms and others who are really driven out of that market of providing quality health care. And then the 6th component is infrastructure. It's both a reliable power system that's both affordable and constant. So a company like we were just at, where you're running 4 shifts, they can't afford to have any outages in power. They lose tremendous amounts of money. And a good infrastructure system when it comes to transportation. And that's probably, between me and Barrett, one of the big differences. He and the governor want to put $810 million into a high-speed rail line between Milwaukee and Madison. To me, I'd like to see that money, and I would go to Congress and lobby them to reprogram it, as we've done in the past in Wisconsin, to spend that money on roads and bridges, which I think are in dire disrepair right now. That's going to drive our state's economy, not a high-speed rail line that creates, admittedly, only 55 permanent jobs.